Okay, during our COVID-19 crisis, what should your IEP look like? Your IEP should look like your IEP. Guys, it depends on what your implementation dates are. And if your implementation dates started in August and they run through the end of the school year, then guys, your IEP is your IEP is your IEP. All you're doing is making some adjustments based upon the safety and health standard, but you're not creating new goals. That's not what you're doing. All you can do is amend your IEP and amend your IEP temporarily and maybe extend the implementation dates. And if you're in Alabama, that would be extending it to, let's say, June 5th or into the summer. You can have an IEP meeting over the phone. You can. And you probably will, starting soon. Um, but guys, you got to be reasonable about this. Some of you aren't going to have video capabilities or telephone capabilities. Um, there's going to be a lot of IEPs to go through in a this amount of time, because now the schools are already sort of behind in IEP season. So be flexible, please. Um, the only thing that you need to be aware of is that when the school system, if you're creating next year's IEP, guys, we're not going to be in this situation. We're going to be business as usual, and your kid's going to be back in their normal, least restrictive environment. All right. There's only a temporary exception based upon a state emergency under the safety and health standard that has put all students in the same sort of least restrictive environment, which is somewhere along the continuum of alternative placements in its own little made up category temporarily. Okay. So if you do have your IEP meeting, you should have your IEP meeting charting next school year based upon just traditional course of business. You should not have an IEP created for COVID-19 for this short period of time. We are not diluting your child's IEP that ran for 75% of this school year in a traditional fashion. We're not diluting that IEP. The standard of a free and appropriate public education still applies to your child's IEP because 75% of it was active during normal course of business. The only thing that's going to be different is how we serve your child in a comparable manner not comparable manner per the child's IEP per se, but in a comparable manner under our emergency status. Okay, and that's a good faith attempt. It's not perfect, guys. This is where you got to be flexible and you got to work with your staff on what that means. But my analysis of your child's whether the school provided your child a free and appropriate public education is going to be the same as it always has been. And that's going to track from your implementation start date to your implementation end date. And if your child wasn't making measurable progress by the time the schools announced a closure, 75% into the school year, then just like years, for all the years that I've been doing this, guys, and I just haven't seen that many schools make massive gains in the last 9 weeks of a school year, knowing that almost all of April is eaten up by testing. And then a couple weeks into May is parties and closing shop. All right. I'm a realist about what happens in the last 9 weeks of school. Tuck in there also, your spring break. So just during this emergency time period, there needs to be some adjustments and flexibility on how best to serve your child under the safety and health standard of our declared emergency. Now, people are throwing around the word comparable fashion. Well, that's fine. Use it, but comparable fashion per the stated emergency. Good faith effort is how I read it. But they shouldn't be creating new goals for your child. That's what they shouldn't be doing, because your IEP is already 75% completed for the majority of you. All right. And by having them come in and create all these news, no. It's just coming up with a mutual agreement on how to serve your child under this standard for the remainder of the school year. And then we'll sit there and we'll talk about, what the potential standard would be for, let's say, extended school year or compensatory or remedial services that I'm quite sure many schools will need to offer. Because I have a feeling that even though the schools are closed, that the state of emergency will be lifted. My viewpoint is before May is when that will be lifted. I'm quite the optimist recently when it comes to what I think is going to end up happening with this pandemic situation. So my optimism has us, returning to normal business before May, which means at that point the schools, even though they're physically closed, will need to address their summer programs, and they're going to need to be beefy. But I'm going to do a video about that.